if we thought Gnosticism was a serious threat to the church, this is the old hanger-on. Because Arianism is still around today. It is a belief that pretty much looks and focuses upon the Son as created by the Father and not eternal and not involved as a part of the creation of the world. He was just created by the Father. And that means that Jesus had a point in time when he began. That's what they're saying. And then, that meaning he was not co-eternal. And that would mean that he's not the same substance of the Father. And that would mean that he had a beginning and he's eternal, so he doesn't have, he's immortal, but not eternal. So he had a point of beginning that makes him immortal. Kind of like what we believe about us in terms of our souls. That we as souls are immortal, but not eternal. We have a point of beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then this particular heresy was condemned as far back as the beginning of when the church is coming into existence in 325, and that was at Nicaea, one of the very first councils called by Constantine to kind of quell this disturbance in the church. Constantine was really about trying to have unity. He wasn't a biggie on whether this doctrine's right or this doctrine's right. He was more about, I want unity in this church. If I'm going to put my stamp on it, I don't want it to be divisive, because a divisive church can mean a divisive colony, and he didn't want that. So he was about trying to get this thing contained. And so it was condemned again, but it's interesting that as certain Arian missionaries worked their way up into northern Europe, it hung on with the Teutonic or German tribes up there. And today, this very idea of the Arian idea of Christ exists within the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and in the Jehovah's Witnesses, are two of the prominent groups that carry the same idea of Arianism with them to this day.
Is that like the whole Church of Mormonism? Like they believe that Jesus isn't divine? Or
No, he's not divine.
That's good.
Really? Cool.
Any other question on this one? This permeated the church well into the 5th century. And then, like I said, it's been a hanger-on, and it keeps cropping up its head every now and then. And today, we have these two cults as well. Coming down here toward the end, we've got Athanasius, another interesting person from this particular period of time, another one that we would consider to be an apologist. He was called the Black Dwarf, a North African, out of the area of, well, they've been kind of around the North Shore, the North Shore of Africa, well, it'd be the South Shore of the Mediterranean Sea, North Africa. He was very much against Athanasius. We have him providing a list of 27 books of the New Testament as early as 367. And quite frankly, his influence upon the church councils against Athanasius, against Arianism, and again, even though he dies before the canonization, his influence upon the 27 books of the New Testament had a tremendous amount of influence. So we cannot underestimate. He was a bishop and then was thrown into exile. I don't know how many times in and out of exile, but a very tremendous force in the early church. You cannot underestimate Athanasius' influences, and you can read a little more about him. All right. Some of his Christology. This is where we began to deal with the idea that Jesus is of the same substance of the Father. He was not the same individual as the Father, but the same essence. And here's where we come down to a hair-splitting word in the Greek, and better understood in the Greek, homoousian, which means same substance. And the idea that the same stuff of. And this has been coming along, but Athanasius kind of helps us cement this into place. That Christ was subordinate in function, but of the same substance. This means that in every way God is, Christ is, and the Holy Spirit is. Eventually the Holy Spirit works its way into the same idea as well as we begin to develop on our Trinity. And we develop the idea out of oneness. We develop the idea of oneness, of that they are one God in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Very God of very God. We use that statement in one of our creeds. Of the same substance. When you look at the Nicene Creed, they spell this out pretty much in detail. So when Christ became incarnate, he took the human nature while keeping his divine nature, both housed in one body. And so he was perfectly human, at the same time he was perfectly divine. And that these two were not mingled, but coexisted. And there's a difference here when you understand the idea of mingling makes a third other. That's another heresy that created later on. They said that the nature of the divine and the human were mingled together to create a third something. Yes?
So would he have said that Christ was not divine from birth? That it came upon him at some point, possibly?
No.
Okay.
He was divine because he coexisted
with
God. He was divine from the very beginning.
Okay.
So his mission from the very point was divine. He was simply talking about that these two natures, human and divine, coexisted in one body.
Gotcha.
They weren't mingled, which created a third something. That was not where he was going with.
Okay.
Any other question on that? All right. That ends that particular slide. You can turn that off. We'll take a break here.